Well, Ava Santina, political correspondent from Politics Joe, and The Sun's chief political correspondent, Jack Elsom, are with us for a final look through this morning's papers. Thank you for coming back, guys. There's always a concern that you might not.
It's a very big possibility, frankly, on this programme.
You never know. They might have a lovely time in the green room and then go off for non-alcoholic drinks. Jack, what are you going to take us through from the I paper?
Page 14 of the I, and we're back talking about this planned pro-Palestinian march at the weekend, because a subplot of this, what might actually become the main story, is how football hooligans are planning to come down to London in their droves and essentially protect these iconic statues, the Cenotaph, the Winston Churchill statue. Now, we saw this happen in the Black Lives Matter protest of 2020, I think, and what we saw was some quite ugly clashes between the two protest groups. And so police are incredibly concerned that we might see ugly scenes on the streets of London if we have a meeting of the Palestinian march and also the football hooligans. We know that football hooligans like a tear-up, and they sort of often spoil for a fight. And so I think this is quite concerning. You've had call to arms, as they put it, by some football hooligans groups, and then as part of that, maybe even some far-right protesters getting in the mix as well. So all quite concerning, and all eyes on Saturday.
Yeah, one would have thought that those areas, those incendiary areas, as it were, would be cornered off somehow, that you can't even get to them. So I know that the march itself is not going to go down Whitehall, it's not going to go near the Cenotaph, but even those that want to protect something that maybe, as it turns out, doesn't need protecting, I'm pretty sure those protesters wouldn't get there either.
Yeah, I think, this has been really hyped up by our Home Secretary, who has, to put it politely, has sort of dragged this debate into the gutter. If you are you're the Home Secretary, you're the overseer of the Metropolitan Police, and you're meant to be instilling some kind of calm amongst the public, and actually Suella Braverman has used the last week to basically ramp up tensions. And now you're in a predicament where there are two groups who basically are premeditating a fight with each other. And, the two marches were not two marches, Remembrance Sunday and the pro-Palestinian march were never going to come into contact with each other at all. The people who are fighting for pro-Palestine or, arguing for their cause won't even go anywhere near Whitehall. So the discussion about them potentially vandalising the Cenotaph, or I've even heard people talking about the plans to interrupt the 2-minute silence. None of this has ever been said by any of the organisers. And it's just a shame that's been whipped up by a cabinet secretary.
But there are lone people we've seen it already in Rochdale last night, so it can happen. We know that there are, horrendous banners and people in loudhailers shouting, awful things. So
and they get arrested. If you say anything pro-Hamas, you get arrested.
Yeah, but there is a sense that, not necessarily at the time, which is, I understand the police reasoning behind that so as not to inflame things further. But, there is a sense that it doesn't take many in the crowd to kick off.
Yeah, and the police have met the organisers of this pro-Palestinian march. The threat at the moment is the extreme fringes of both groups coming together, peeling off, and essentially meeting at some location and coming together, and that's obviously not good for anyone. And obviously, in the back of all our minds here is the situation in Gaza, which is appalling, and then also remembering Armistice Day. And I just hope that in Saturday this doesn't get lost and get overshadowed by some ugly events.
And a lot of this, sadly, from what I've seen on social media from the different groups calling for people to come down to London, has been fuelled ultimately by Islamophobia. Xenophobia, the fear that, the country is being taken over by a different ideology. And actually, our previous guest, I thought, was very articulate on the matter, which is we need to have nuanced conversations. We need to have honest, open conversations and not be so polarised and presumptive in what the other side wants and need. But it's going to be potentially quite a scary time for many people on Saturday.
Well, this is what you used to see as well. Or you currently see with some of the migrant hotels that are around the country. There was an incident in Liverpool last year where there were a couple of hundred protesters who were ramped up, and they turned up outside this hotel and they were, shouting expletives and making a bit of a scene of themselves. None of them could actually be traced to any of the local area. But there are groups out there who are Islamophobic, and there are groups out there who like a fight, and they will travel to achieve both of those goals.
But there are also groups that look at this legitimately and go, hang on, what is going on in a Western country when people are walking around with masks on their face, holding banners, holding flags? Sometimes it could be ISIS, it could be an anti-Israel, an anti-Jewish thing. There are some people who are genuinely perturbed by the sheer amount of people there. And I know that the media can focus on that, and you can run away with the idea that it's everyone. But there is a sense, I think, legitimately from some who aren't those protesters that are turning up outside, intimidating people in hotels, who are just absolutely concerned about it and think this is what is going on. This is the United Kingdom. We're not a medieval death cult. Why would we be supporting something like that?
Completely. And the undeniable fact of this of this latest series of marches is that whatever the intentions of the people that go in these marches, a lot of people in the Jewish community said that they are frightened to go to central London. And that is an appalling state of affairs in 21st century Britain. You know, we always say never again after the Holocaust and the persecution of Jewish people. And whatever their intentions on this march and this series of marches, there has been a sense of Jewish people being afraid. And I think that, you know, it's now incumbent on all politicians to really sort of dial down the temperature of this.
Well, it's context, isn't it? So if you were going to show up outside the Israeli embassy, or you were going to show up outside, you know, perhaps in Golders Green, that would be, you know, and you were shouting from the river to the sea, then that would be seen as an aggressive act, wouldn't it? That would be seen as an intimidatory act. Whereas if you are going on a pro-Palestine march and you are there with the sole intent of speaking for the people who are dying in the region, then that's an entirely different argument.
But there are people that look at this and go, well, hang on, there's been abuses of, in this case, Muslims in other countries. Yemen is an obvious example. Elsewhere, China, goodness knows where else. But where were the protests for that?
I will not have this. I will not have this.
What do you mean you won't have this? You're going to have it,
You can't
Santina,
revise history like this, Ian.
No, but why do we not get those protests?
There were protests, Ian.
Where
there
were
protests.
How big were those?
There were swathes of protests for Syria. I specifically remember Hilary Benn standing up in the comments and saying, we are going to bomb Syria. And a lot of people turned up on the streets and revolted against it.
We didn't have anything like this, which is
because
why
it hasn't been covered to the same degree. It's nowhere near as much coverage.
There is a sense that it's more of an anti-Israel thing. This has been the classic playbook for years. For some curious reason, you've got these horrendous areas of the Middle East that are living in 1582 and have values about women, homosexuality, crime punishment that we discarded half a millennium ago. And yet you've got this triangle of the United States, the United Kingdom and Israel, who apparently we are this trio of horror stories compared to the backdrop of what is going on. That is what's playing out
That's
here.
not the debate, because
that's part of the debate.
No, there are people earnestly going on that march who don't like to see 3,500 children, probably more now, sorry if my figures aren't up to date, who have been killed.
Nobody
and people are arguing for that, all right? So just because you don't agree with someone ideologically, and I'm not playing into the hands of Hamas here when I say this, just because you don't agree with someone ideologically doesn't mean that those citizens should die. You're arguing on a humanitarian front.